Hello. So today we're going to examine 3 different books to talk about how academic language and differentiated instruction affect instruction in a social science classroom. And first we're going to talk about Academic Conversations, which is the book by Zwires and Crawford. Okay, so historical thinking. Good history conversations depend on skills of interpretation, perspective taking, identifying importance, and persuading. And some of these thinking skills is going to be something like inferring cause and effect, recognizing bias, and applying and transferring knowledge. And we can facilitate the student development of these thinking skills by offering insightful guiding questions. So oftentimes in my classroom, one way to incorporate historical thinking and promote academic conversations is to read a primary source or a secondary source. And then I offer them guiding questions, and then I'll have them talk in groups where they can discuss these questions. So that way students are having the opportunity to have an academic conversation about their reading, but I'm offering them guiding questions in order to facilitate and scaffold their conversation. And then after that, we can have a classroom discussion about what they discussed in their small group, where again, I can facilitate academic conversations and the use of academic language of students. The chapter also talked about assessing history conversations through summative and formative assessments, and it also offered a sample rubric so that students can be evaluated on and receive feedback on the use of academic language and academic conversation in terms of history. So here is a sample rubric, and as the book notes over here, some categories on the sample rubric should be think and talk like historians, staying focused, support ideas and opinions with examples, paraphrase partner ideas, and use communication behaviors. So you can see that these are noted in the rubric, and then there's 3 points, what a 3-point would look like, 2 points, and then a 1-point rubric. And the last section of the chapter has a bunch of different activities that you can do to promote historical conversations. So you can take a look on page 153 through 165 for those activities. Some of them are noted on these 2 slides. There's history quotation conversations, historical source analysis table, cause and effect diagram, fact-thought combination, and tackle history's mysteries, controversies, and big questions. Continuing on, my image of and in history, movie critics and writers, history time capsule, choose the best image, and paired role play stations. Next, we're going to take a look at the book Integrating Differentiated Instruction and Understanding by Design by Tomlinson and McTighe. The first section is responsive teaching with UBD and academic diverse classrooms. A few things that I want to note here. One is to cluster learner needs to make instructional planning more efficient. We do a lot of small group work in my classroom, so one thing that I make sure to do is to put my English learner with someone that he's comfortable working with, and then also because his native language is Spanish, I always make sure to group him with someone who is a Spanish speaker who is also fluent in English, so that she can help him translate as needed. And then I also make sure that my accelerated learners are grouped with other accelerated learners so that they can maybe examine the document or do the group work in more depth and have a more advanced conversation if they need to. And then the other thing that I want to make note here is to ask management questions to allow instructional flexibility. One thing that I always ask my class and my students is how much more time do they need. So I always start off by giving them like a time limit. So, okay, you have 5 minutes to work on this, but I typically keep in mind that that's on the shorter end of the time. And after that 5 minutes is up, I will typically ask them if they need a few more minutes. And then I'll usually give them a little bit more time after that. One, to give the students autonomy on and give them a voice in the classroom, but then also to make sure that I'm keeping track of where my students are in their student progress throughout the class. Another thing that I want to make note of from this book is the use of essential questions to plan instruction and present information in a meaningful way. So this is a really big and crucial thing, especially in a social science classroom, because I like to plan backwards from an essential question for every unit. So we should have a big question that is dedicated for the entire unit, and in every lesson or each segment of the unit, students should get a little piece of how to answer that essential question, and then by the end of the unit, students should have the background knowledge and the resources and the context to answer the entire essential question. So that one gives them a purpose for learning all of these different things, and then two, it creates a way for students to make connections between different historical events that we might be learning in the classroom. Another thing that this book talks about is grading and reporting achievement. And one thing that I want to make note about this slide is that the reporting system should support standards and differentiation, meaning that each student should be evaluated and assessed on the learning standards that we pose, but then also provide support and differentiation so that each student has the opportunity to successfully demonstrate their understanding of the content. So this could be something like if I had my class write a paragraph on something that they learned, maybe like a reflection paragraph, I could provide differentiation by providing sentence starters or a paragraph outline for my students with IEPs or maybe an English learner. Okay, the last book that we're going to discuss is by Schmoker. It's focused by Schmoker on a chapter called Social Studies with Reading and Writing at the Core. So one thing that I want to make note of this slide is that analytic and argumentative reading and writing cannot be replaced by skits, posters, and other activities aimed at multiple intelligences or learning styles. So Schmoker basically says that because social studies is the second most intensively literate of the disciplines, we can't get around reading and writing in social studies. We have to have students learn to effectively write an argumentative essay or paragraph, and they also have to be able to read and analyze primary and secondary sources. And while it's okay to incorporate other maybe more engaging and fun activities like doing a skit or creating a poster, that can't be an alternative for students to showcase their reading and writing skills. Schmoker also suggests that to encourage students to write and respond to questions as experts, meaning that we should be teaching our students to think like a historian, read like a historian, ask questions as a historian, and analyze documents and historical events and historical phenomena as historians. And he also suggests that students should write an end of the unit paper that responds to an inquiry question, and this could be mostly done in class in an open book environment based on in-class readings and lectures to have them analyze and make connections between the things that they learned, using their in-class readings and materials as evidence to come up with a main claim and write on it. We can also teach students and support them in thinking like a historian by first modeling the activity for them. So that could be something like doing a primary source reading together and modeling a think aloud as we read through the class. So students know how a historian should think and what kind of questions we should be asking based on the document given. And then after modeling, we have to make sure we're following up with a guided instruction portion and a check for understanding to make sure that students were following along and they got the right information out of the activity.